I know most of you are aware of King Edward VIII, who gave up the throne for the woman he loved. However, there was another Edward before him who created as much of a scandal because of his love life. Maybe even more damage than his descendants after he was caught engaging in unkingly relationships with his male companions. Worse, when made to choose between the nation and his lovers, the king picked the latter. Records revealed that these relationships angered the nation and the queen, which ultimately led to betrayal, a fight for the throne, and allegations of murder. But legends say that King Edward II died at Berkeley Castle after receiving a red-hot poker to the bottom. Nasty. While nothing had been confirmed yet, one thing is for sure: King Edward II is the best example of what a king should not be, and his demise left history with countless questions that need to be answered. Welcome to Crazy Histories, where we bring you the craziest and weirdest facts from human history. Some of the things discussed in this video may be offensive or disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Who is Edward II? Before we discuss all the mind-boggling things King Edward II did, let's first know his origins to better understand his actions. King Edward II was the King of England from 1307 until his forced abdication in 1327. He was the fourth son of King Edward I and his wife Eleanor of Castile, and during his reign, he faced several challenges, including conflicts with the barons over taxation, the Scottish Wars of Independence, and a strained relationship with his queen, Isabella of France, among many others. However, above all these challenges, one of his greatest shortcomings is related to his heart. More specifically, his fondness for everyone other than his queen. The king was pretty well known for enjoying the companionship of his male favorites. It was even said that after coming home from his wedding in the queen's home country, Edward paid no attention to his bride, but instead showered his court favorite with kisses upon stepping foot in the castle. Maybe this explained why he was more often than not described as a weak and ineffective ruler who lacked political skills and was easily influenced by others, particularly his favorites. He was known for his extravagance and love of entertainment, including hunting and music, and was criticized for neglecting his duties as king. While he might sound like a good-for-nothing king, he did try to promote justice and reform in some areas, such as legal institutions and hunting laws. However, his personal life, disastrous relationships with male favorites, and military defeats led to widespread dissatisfaction among the nobility that eventually resulted in his deposition and execution. Speaking of his favorites, one of them goes by the name of Piers Gaveston, who entered the life of the king in a flamboyant manner, but later died with his head cut off. This is a major spoiler, but let me walk you through how Gaveston ended up headless. Edward II and Piers Gaveston. Piers Gaveston first appears in 1300, when Prince Edward was 15 and Gaveston was not much older, so just imagine how young they were when they first met. But this did not stop the young king from picking his favorites, and soon enough, Gaveston was the subject of the prince's fancy. Because of this, Gaveston had been exiled to France by the ailing King Edward I, who seemingly knew the disaster that would happen if he allowed his son to spend more time with Gaveston. Of course, this angered the young prince. In an angry tantrum, he showered Gaveston with gifts and went with him to Dover to bid him farewell. The two were left with no choice but to part, but little did they know this would not last forever. When King Edward I passed away, they were reunited, and Edward II wasted no time and appointed Gaveston Earl of Cornwall. But Edward II needed to marry to successfully inherit the throne, and we all know he can't bring his male favorite to church. This is where Queen Isabel entered the picture, and the infamous kiss that crushed the Queen's heart happened. Here's how. When the newlyweds arrived at Dover, Edward II immediately left Queen Isabel to meet his cherished friend and counselor. Piers Gaveston, Earl of Cornwall, was waiting for his master at the docks, while his new queen and her entourage watched from a distance, while he hugged and kissed him on the cheeks for several minutes. It was not a secret that the king favored the Earl of Cornwall, and in return, Gaveston skillfully used these favors to exploit his way up the ranks. At some point, people even referred to him as the Second King. When the queen finally became pregnant, the court and the barons decided it was the perfect timing to finally ask for the exile of the Second King. King Philip IV started to voice his displeasure with the way his daughter had been treated, and so they were left with no choice but to exile Gaveston. He did come back the following year, but by then King Edward II was struggling to keep control. By 1312, Edward's hold on power was eroding, and when influential lords decisively turned against him, he and Gaveston were cornered. Soon after, Gaveston was taken prisoner and killed by his foes, with his head getting chopped off. While most of you might think the king had learned his lesson and stayed loyal to his queen, think again. After the death of Gaveston, another man entered his life, this time in the person of Hugh Despenser. Who is Hugh Despenser? Hugh Despenser the Younger was appointed royal chamberlain in 1318. This was after one of his favorites literally got his head cut off. To make things worse, Hugh was actually Edward's nephew by marriage. Naturally, this infuriated the wealthy nobility once more, who saw Despenser as a challenge to their power and privilege. And just like the previous one, Despenser was greedy and used his closeness to the king as his leverage to gain power. Because of this, there was another second king besides the true king. But history was expected to repeat itself. At this point, the relationship between France and England is at its weakest. And it didn't help that Despenser did several things to aggravate the queen even more. The most humiliating and damaging of which was removing her children from her custody. We all know that is not something you should do to a mother and an angry queen at that. This happened when Edward's holdings in Gascony were threatened by Isabella's brother, the King of France. Because of this, Edward issued an edict ordering the arrest of all French immigrants in England and Wales. In turn, Hugh used the law to settle a score with Isabella, with whom he had been at odds for years, by putting her under house arrest and taking her kids. Her long-suffering mistrust of her spouse gave way to an unrelentingly angry contempt as she watched him do nothing. Having enough of all the BS his husband and his lover did, the queen decided it was time to seek revenge. Seeking help from her favorites, Queen Isabella and Roger Mortimer. This was the last straw for instigating an uprising against Despenser and escaping to France, and on September 1326, they launched an attack on England. In November, the king and Despenser were ultimately apprehended near Llantrisant in South Wales. Hugh Despenser was executed at Hereford by being hung, drawn, and quartered, while the king was brought to Kenilworth Castle. After this, he was imprisoned and transferred from one place to another to ensure that his supporters would not be able to set him free and that he stay behind bars. While all of these unfolded, Queen Isabella remained unbothered. She enjoyed the show while eating a hearty dinner. All the while, Edward II followed the path of all overthrown kings. He was imprisoned at Berkeley Castle, forced to abdicate, and then vanished without a trace. According to legend, he was killed by having a hot poker shoved up his anus, but no one really confirmed this. But who knows? This might be the most appropriate way to exit for someone like him. There was even a debate about whether he was murdered or not. Most historians agree that he did in fact pass away at the castle by some means or another, and that his death made things easier politically for his captors. Whatever might have happened to King Edward II, his story is something history books are bound to tell, and will surely set an example of how a monarch should act if he wants to live a long and happy life. How about you? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. See you.